All right, welcome everyone. Good morning if you're on the West Coast like me, good afternoon, or whatever time it is for you, wherever you are. Um, Hopefully you know why you're here. You're here to discuss Dr. Stephanie Evans's Black Feminist Writing, a practical guide to publishing academic books. So if that's what yes, we got the cover. If that's what you're here for, you're in the right place. I want to introduce myself quickly, and then I will introduce Dr. Evans, and then we will get into it. So I am Laura Portwood-Stacer. I am a professional developmental editor and publishing consultant for academic authors. I'm the author of the book proposal book, and through my book. Oh, thank you. Didn't realize we'd have props. Awesome. Um, so through the book, through my courses online, through webinars, I've helped thousands of scholarly writers navigate the book publishing process. I hold a PhD in communication from the University of Southern California. And after teaching in the Department of Media, Communication, and Culture at New York University, I left academia to launch my editorial business, Manuscript Works, in 2015. And I now live in Los Angeles. And if you'd like to learn more about what I do, if I'm new to you, you can find out more at manuscriptworks.com. And I'm really pleased and honored to have Dr. Stephanie Y. Evans here with us today. She is a professor of Black Women's Studies in the Institute for Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies, and affiliate faculty of Africana Studies at Georgia State University. She served 12 consecutive years as department chair at Georgia State University, Clark Atlanta University, and University of Florida. She has sustained a research interest in Black women's intellectual history for over 2 decades. Her research is rooted in educational history, but has evolved to include mental health and wellness as a way to address systemic stressors of being department chair. Professor Evans has published 4 single-authored books and 5 co-edited books, so she's an expert on academic publishing, and her full portfolio is available at professorevans.net. And we will share the link to that in the chat. Hopefully people can see the chat here. And we'll also share the pre-order link for Black Feminist Writing if you are intrigued by what you hear today and want to get your hands on the book. This webinar is being recorded. You will be able to access the recording through the webinar site where you registered. I'm going to send out an email, I think tomorrow, with the link if you've forgotten how to get in there. So you'll be getting the recording later. And for anyone who's watching the recording later, you'll have full access to this. And you'll have lifetime access. I don't intend to take it down at any point. So I think without further ado, let's get into talking about the book. So Dr. Evans, I just want to begin by asking, what made you want to write this book?
First of all, I have to thank you so much for the work that you've done. Part of the reason why I wanted to write this book was some of the things that I learned through reading the book proposal book. Even though I was a published author many times over, you really can't stop learning. And so I wanted to share the things that I'd learned over time, but also to demonstrate the power of developmental editing and the need to continue to be invested in the editing process. And to share the joys and the pains and the sorrows and the triumphs and the mistakes, just because I love writing. And so I wanted to share what I've learned over the past 20 years as a faculty member, 30 years as an academic writer, starting as an undergraduate, and really to honor the blessings that I've been given, particularly by Professor Bracy. This book was dedicated to my dissertation advisor who passed recently, and it really helped me appreciate the rarity of what I'd been granted in terms of writing and mentorship. And really, it's it's dedicated to Professor Bracy, but it's really a testament to the network of people who have poured into me, the network of mentors, all of my dissertation committee, all of the people who have sat me down over the years and said, okay, this is what sucks about your writing. This is what you need to work on. This is what is helpful. And just to share in that communal mentoring and giving back. I also wanted to take seriously academic writing as a practice, because they're all different types of writing. They're all valuable in their different ways. But to share why all of my books are academic books, and to challenge the myth that academic writing is not accessible, that it is, and to kind of parse out what academic writing does differently. The inspiration for this particular book at this particular moment was this flurry of review requests, because as you write books, you're invited to review. And so between 2023 or 22 and 23, I reviewed 12 different book manuscripts. And it was a joy. Some were on review panels, some were from presses. And it helped me, kind of see what other people were asking about publishing that they thought I knew, and to work with other panelists, other senior scholars, but also codify some of the things that I was learning about developmental editing. And it's kind of like when you teach writing or you edit writing, you see some of the flaws in your own writing. So along with the mentoring, I wanted to think about what academic writing meant in terms of peer review, and how we can recognize all of the different types of writing, but also have some sort of relative standardization of shared information. There are two other reasons that I wanted to write this book. One was to challenge the normalization of stress, in that because I was a department chair, writing became my little act of mini resistance, that as I am accountable to my colleagues, to the students, I was chair while I was teaching. All of these different challenges to my writing time made me stressed out. And as I, progressed through up the academic ladder as an academic, not only a tenured professor, but a full professor and a chair, it seemed that the higher you get up the academic ladder, the less intellectual production is valued. And so I wanted to create a different environment for myself and my colleagues to say, even if you're doing administration, or especially if you're doing administration, you should be deeply invested in peer review, academic freedom, and sustaining this project of academics, especially because it's so deeply under attack. The last reason is connected to that last point, that my entire career I've been in race and gender studies, Black studies and women's studies. And part of it is because as an undergraduate, I was clearly informed that there was no such thing as Black women's studies. So we can study everything else, but we can't take seriously Black studies and women's studies. And so I've sustained this direction of writing because it is imperative to not just institutionalize Black women's studies, but to use Black women's studies as a way to dismantle the most dysfunctional and oppressive parts, not only of academia, but of the world. So that's why I wrote this book.
Great. Great. Thank you for that answer. Um, I've just adjusted the chat settings so that we can share links in it. So Rebecca will be sharing the links that I mentioned. And I should have mentioned there is a Q&A box for people attending. I don't know how much time we'll have for Q&A at the end. We might try to draw out some sort of common themes in the questions, but feel free to pop questions in there if you have them as we're speaking here. Okay, so you had the idea for this book. You wanted to write it. Were you aware of sort of the other guides to publishing and writing that were out there? Did you see certain things missing there that you really wanted to make sure your book would center?
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to writing, of course, as a faculty member, I'm directing dissertations and theses. And so I have this, a series of websites that are referral points. And there's so many good resources out there. What I wanted to emphasize, in addition to challenging stress and promoting wellness and seeing writing as something that you can actually enjoy. I wanted to challenge my students and my peers to invest in, take seriously the literature review, right? It's not like you see so many drive-by literature reviews, like, okay, I'm gonna cite this person, I'm gonna cite this person and keep it moving. That the literature review is actually an essential part of academic writing. And so in the other guides that are out there, the literature review is just, it's important, but not essential. And to really understand that literature review means that you're in conversation with other writers before you, and literature review and peer review are tightly bound together. That you have to demonstrate that you have read what's out there before you talk about making an intervention. So the writer's guides and research guides that are out there and publishing guides all have these little pieces, but I wanted to put them together, that you have to demonstrate to the reader, if you're saying I'm going to make an intervention in my academic discipline, that you've actually read what's been written and who you're agreeing with, who you're disagreeing with. And then the responsibility to cite existing research, to cite the research that's out there so that you can say, this is where I'm positioning my particular argument. And also to connect writing to publishing, because there's so many good writers guides, and you know, I constantly refer my students to, these are the things that you need to be reading, right? But there is a task of writing and there is a task of publishing. And both of those two tasks are really stress-inducing, but the more that you can see them together, that you're writing in a particular tradition for a particular audience, you know, and using a lot of these structural guides as well as the content guides, kind of putting that all together, that you have to see how your work is in relation to work that's been done before, work that's ongoing, and to write, you know, I think the beautiful thing about academic publishing is that it's really slow. I mean, it's painful. It's so painful. Like, you'll write something, you'll send it off, you won't see it for 6 months. You know, meanwhile, you're sitting on your hands waiting for the reviews. Like, there's so much involved in academic writing, but the payoff for that is, if you're writing something that slowly and you're engaging so many different people in the writing process and in the critical review process and citation process, the argument should be that your work should be timeless, right? That it's not, certainly speaks to what's going on in a particular moment, but it's not confined to that moment because it's not published in the now for the now.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I'm so glad that you made that. And hopefully people find that a bit reassuring, that it doesn't have to be, up to the moment or ripped from the headlines. And I also really appreciate the reminder about the importance of the literature review, because, I work with a lot of people who are revising dissertations, and we're sort of constantly telling people, like, cut the literature review. There's too much. Like, your voice is not coming through. But like, it's good to remember you have to do that work.
Yeah,
You have to
you do.
know it, you
You
know?
do. And as you point out in your book, that, the structure has to be there. And even if, and this is the difference between some academics who are academic writers, scholarly writers, and also public writers, there are a lot of people who do public writing who don't really necessarily appreciate all of the work that has gone into being able to write so seamlessly.
Mhm.
And so I started college at St. John's in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so we did Euclidean math, right? And the 47 steps to prove that, a point is that which has no part, a line is breadthless length. And if you draw two lines on an angle, the square on this line plus the square on this line equals the square on this line, right? That's the dissertation. You have to show that you understand each of those 47 steps. The book is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? But the assumption is that you've done the work to understand the underlying principles and the steps. And so the really good scholarly writers mask that detail, like we don't need all the citations, or you really master kind of footnotes and how to embed other things, right? But you don't necessarily say, and now I'm writing this, and now I'm writing that. In this book, as a writer's guide, I wanted to be explicit because there's so many people who don't have that foundational or generational understanding of how to produce scholarly text, that you can actually do that type of writing uh, and then clean it up, right? Then edit it in a way to make it beautiful. So yes, the literature review is there, but it's not as, kind of step by step clunky, but it has to be there because there's
Yeah.
too many people who are just writing a whole bunch of stuff and you're like, you really haven't read so and so, and it's obvious.
Yeah. Um, so what was the proposal and editorial process like for this book? I always like a behind the scenes story. So um, whatever you want to share, but did you approach a publisher about this? Did they approach you? What kind of feedback did you receive? How did that go?
Oh, excellent question. Okay. So, uh, what's wonderful about this is this book was published by SUNY Press, which has much of my work. I've worked with University Press of Florida, Wayne State University Press, and SUNY. This was an academic book, but I approached three different presses. One press said, "Oh, this looks interesting, but we have a diversity book." Okay. Hey, you have one? Wonderful.
Nice.
Another press said, this is really great. We're interested. But by the time they'd responded, I had already confirmed with SUNY. And so I wanted to have a competitive process to say, even though I have a wonderful relationship with SUNY, there was no guarantee that A, they would be interested, or B, that it would go there. So I explored other options, and it just so happened that my long-standing relationship with Rebecca Colesworthy was, she said, yes, we absolutely want this for SUNY Press, for the trade side of the house, but, was not offended in the least that I went to find out what my other options were. That being said, I had to write a proposal, right? And I had to go through peer review. And it's, even for the press side, that's the beauty. There's no guarantee. And it's, oh, I'm a senior scholar, and there's some people who don't feel like it's like it's an affront to ask them for a proposal. No, you need to demonstrate that this book will have clear goals, and we know that you can write, we know that you can publish, but what is it about this piece that we're supposed to understand? So I wrote the book proposal. It was accepted. I wrote the draft. It went for review. It was ripped to shreds. Now, when I tell you, whoever this anonymous reviewer was, ripped my piece to shred, like, I wanted to share it with you. It's like, I want to frame it. I want to put it on my refrigerator. It was 10 pages of single spaced critique that was, and the end was, this book should not be published in its current state. It was a mess. Now, I don't know who this person is. I don't care. I don't want to know. They were right. And with that 10, I mean, it was a love letter, 10 single space pages of crap that I had to, like, this is just raggedy. This is terrible. I don't know what you're saying. And that's when I went again to your book and recrafted, like, what was the structure? What was the organization? And that editing process made for a much better book. I also got love notes, two very extensive series of written love notes from Colesworthy, and in addition to at least 4 or 5 discussions, right? And I welcome that. I want my book to be critiqued in private before it hits public. And so, that the peer review process is so, so important because it helps people like fix your crown and, hide your slip and before it gets to the public view, roundtable readings, whatever you can do to make sure that it's as clean as possible. It's never going to be perfect. I've already found 2 typos, which, congratulations to me. Like, doesn't matter how many people look at it, there's going to be a typo. But I can anticipate some of the critique of the work. and can acknowledge the limitations of the work, and still feel confident in putting it out because people who are close to the project have really thoroughly critiqued it.
Great. I think that's important. I think for a lot of people who are here, maybe who haven't been through that process yet, to understand it may be harrowing, but it will also make your book better,
Yeah. Oh.
hopefully. So who do you hope will read this book? Is it just for early career scholars? Is it for people who have all made it to their 10th book? Who is it for?
It's of course for everyone. My focus is primarily those in race and gender studies, because that is where I have spent my career. And Black studies, women's studies, Black women's studies, race and gender studies, when done correctly, have a different set of responsibilities, right? It's not simply to reify the existing white supremacist, male-centered, violent structures, and it's great that we gain tenure and get distinguished professorships, and all of those things are nice, but the Black Women's Studies project should be to destabilize the institution, right? It should be in good ways. Like, we can't just have a liberal approach. There's no Black liberal feminism where the structure's fine if I can just assure my place in it. No, we need to tear it all apart. Now, how we do that is very different. And so the people who need to read this book are anyone who's deeply invested in academic, in the academic project, in adult education, right? This is and adult education, as well as K through 12, is under attack, but none of these attacks are new. So if you're an undergraduate and you're writing your first paper and you have questioned some of the things that you've been taught in your early education and you want to know how to write differently, this book is for you. You're an undergraduate, and usually I give the analogy of, as you know, in your writing stages, as an undergraduate, you're on the bus. Like, if you take these classes and you pass these classes, you'll get your degree. The MA, you're in a car, right? You're in the driver's seat. You have to write a thesis. Your chair is next to you. The committee's in the back. A PhD, guess what? It's a stick shift. Again, you have to learn how to, not only do you have to drive the car, you have to learn, you have to get the manual. And then for the book, as a faculty member, it's like an elite race car. Like, there's all these bells and whistles and things. And so, after undergraduate, you are in the driver's seat. You are, I was part of an undergraduate research program. So even as an undergraduate in the McNair Scholars Program, I was learning how to position myself in the driver's seat. So whatever stage you're at, and if you are a faculty member and you're a senior faculty member and you've written 5 books and you don't think you need a writing guide, good for you. I do, right? I understand the process of lifelong learning. There's so much more new scholarship that needs to be addressed and understood and incorporated. And you don't know everything that you need to know about writing, particularly in ways that relate to some of the new scholarship that's coming out. So it's for everyone. And it's also to remind us of how academic writing has different accountabilities than those who are not in academia. And I say, like, I refuse to cede academia, right? And there's so many people who are escaping for good reason because it's an abusive environment. But as a Black woman, I've never been in an environment that's not abusive. So where are you going to go? The law, healthcare, business? There's no industry that is without problems. And academia, I think, is one of those places that we can push, we can change, despite the current, what we think of is this current political environment. It has been in operation my entire career. So this book is for everyone who wants to maintain standards of excellence and professionalism while also dismantling the destructive systems of kind of epistemological violence.
Great. Yes. And I want to echo, I learned things from this book that I will carry forward with me. And I think one of the strengths of it is how I can't come up with a better word than like humanely written it is. It's just like you center the whole human of like the writer, right? And I think, you know, everyone can benefit from doing that a bit more in academia and in our writing careers. And one of the things that really spoke to me was in, I've got my bookmarks here. Uh, it's in the introduction. It's on page 6, where you acknowledge that like stress is a part of your experience. Um, and that really spoke to me. And you do this great thing where you list, if people can see that there's a list of the stressors that have impacted your writing career, or have been, you know, around while you were trying to do your writing. Um, and even though you and I have a different set of stressors, just seeing someone name them just made me feel seen, you know, reading this. And you also talk about stressors at different layers. So I wonder if you could maybe explain what those layers are and why you felt it was important to put this list in the book.
Yeah, I think for me, transparency and let me say relative transparency, because Darlene Farkine, as a historian, talks about the ways that Black women in particular make themselves, have a public voice and have this idea of transparency when in fact there's so many things that we're masking. So there's so many things that have happened to me that I will never write about, that I'll never be able to vocalize, or won't in certain audiences. So I'm transparent to a point, only to the point that I think it's useful for the project. And so the stressors, when thinking about, since I entered college in 1994, um, in order to deal with stress, you have to identify it. And so Margot Okazawa Ray wrote about social locations, right? Micro, meso, macro, global. And anyone who's taken my class is, really familiar with that: micro, meso, macro, global, because it's a way to understand yourself in context, your experience in context. It's not enough to just say, well, this is what happened to me. Okay, we value your experience, but you also have to place that in historical and political and sociological, like all of these different contexts. And so Margot Okazawa Ray said that micro, the individual, is in relation to the meso, which is the family, the community, the organization, schools, work, the macro, which is national, and then the global, which is international. So you have to understand the stressors that come in all of these different locations. Then you can talk about healing and wellness in all of those locations as well. It's not enough to say, I've been studying mental health and wellness really as a result of the duress that I experienced in academia, right? So I'm studying yoga, I'm studying tea, I did a paper on wine, it was fantastic. But those things alone, if you don't address the structural issues that are causing that stress, you've got to address it at all levels. So Margot Okazawa Ray's work in so many ways helped me understand how to relate, and writers like Layli Maparian, how to relate the individual to the social, to the institutional, to the global, right? And so the stressors, I was working in college. I was in California when Proposition 209 happened and outlawed diversity, the CSU system strikes, 9/11, Iraq war. I had a miscarriage, COVID-19, a hair loss, my spouse was ill, like all of these different things. I applied for a research leave 3 times, and that was denied. Fortunately, I'm on a research leave this semester, which is fantastic. But all of these different ways that stress happens needs to be, really clear, so that what you are going through right now is by no means particular, right? What's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Palestine, Gaza, what's happening in the Sudan, what's happening. We have to understand that we're writing under duress, under global duress. Of course, the US politics, all of this stuff, but it's not new. How do you keep writing in, when everything's on fire. You have to understand that everything's always been on fire. It's always going to be on fire. Your job is to help put out the fire. And if you have a purpose in your writing, it makes it easier. Writing, especially when I was a department chair, writing was my way of securing mental health. Like I could write something that could make me feel better because I felt like I was doing something that could impact the systems in some way.
Great. And I love that I mean, the list is in the introduction. So it's sort of like, okay, we faced it, and now we have the rest of this book to help us sort of figure out
Mhm.
what to do next. Um, so there's a couple other moments that I just want to sort of tell people who are here today about, and then ask you about to learn more about your thinking behind them. Um, so I'm on page 70 now, and I'm just going to read a bit from what you said. You say use artwork, music, and other creative sources to help sharpen your message. For example, deciding on cover art to recommend to the press can sharpen your ideas of what you want to convey in writing. Even if that image does not end up on the actual book cover, art used for visual presentation can help you clarify and more fully communicate the meaning of your message. And I've never seen that piece of advice anywhere. And I thought it was pretty brilliant that, even if an author can't really control what the cover of their book looks like, sometimes just thinking about what you would like the cover to look like could help you figure out what you want your book to say to people when they pick it up. Um, so I thought that might be a good entry into talking about the cover of your book and how it
Yeah,
happened. How'd you land on it? Was this something that you used for inspiration? So I'll try and hold it up so people can see it. Uh,
I love that. Yeah, real close so you can see the actual letters. I love this question. I am I come from a creative background. I come from musical theater. My grandparents were performers at the Howard Theater, and I grew up with jazz in the house. And I majored in dance in high school, and so I was singing and dancing and art, and um, that creative part of the work was always there. I'm for no in particular reason made a music video for each of the books that I wrote. The first book, Black Woman in the Ivory Tower, I made a music video because I was talking to churches and to elementary schools, and there were people who were never going to read my little academic book who I wanted to convey, like, this is a beautiful history. So I created this visual, and I'm a very visual learner. So I created these visual videos that had the kind of main message in some of the images and the art, and digital humanities is especially important to me because, again, as a visual learner, if you can have a map or a timeline or pictures or documents, it really brings the story to life. And this particular case, most of my books have some sort of autobiographical element. And the thing that has kept me writing over the years was a letter that I got from that I wrote to my grandmother when I was 3 years old. So if you go to the website, you'll see that the full letter and a picture of me when I was three. I was born in Washington, D.C. We moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then Germany, Illinois, Arizona. I moved a lot when I was young. But when I moved to Albuquerque, I wrote a letter to my grandmother and sent it to her in DC. So fast forward, I'm in my first year in graduate school. I am convinced that I'm a terrible failure. I'm never going to make it. I'm not smart enough. Everybody's better prepared and knows more than I do, and it shows. And so I take a train to DC to talk to Grams and say, listen, I'm just not going to make it. Grad school is hard. I have my doubts about, maybe I can go back into the restaurant business or the healthcare industry or something else. And she pulls out this letter and she says, baby, you wrote me this letter. You are a writer. You didn't draw me a picture. And so anytime I had doubts about my ability to write, um, I went back to that letter. It was a talisman for me. It was a touchstone. It was something, it was material culture. It was affirmation that not only did she believe in me, but this is what I love. This is what I wanted to do. I didn't draw her a picture. I wrote her, it was my notes, and I was thinking that this could be a note to myself, right? And so I sent this to the press and I said, I want to have this letter prominently featured because I want to unpack how and why I write so much. I've always been a writer, and that there's something in your past, even if it's not writing itself, there's something in your past that is an indicator, right? That allows you to understand, why are you writing about this topic? And so I sent it to the press and I said, this is, I want this letter prominently featured on the cover. And they're like, yeah, no, that's not going to work for us, because it's really busy and it's really messy. And so this is another reason why I love working with university presses. You have a whole staff of people who are going to do something, university presses, trade presses, if you get the right one, you have to get the right one, who know what they're doing, who know how to incorporate the message. And so, in the front of the book, as you'll see, they use the letter, right? The letter as the font. But the SUNY people, they're so special. And I didn't realize it until I actually got the physical book, but they incorporated the letter in the back of the book too. Like, I wrote the letter and then I signed my name, Yvette Evans, the letter's all backwards and stuff. And it's that attention to detail that helps, when you have art and creativity, all of the books that I've written that you'll see here on the website, I've paid attention to partner with artists who have this message, that allows invites the reader in to say, this is what this book is about. And there's so many authors that do it well. Like, so, that's again, another reason why I've partnered with who I've partnered with in the press, because I have autonomy in the way that you don't necessarily have if you're going to kind of a big business trade publication that says, we're going to do it our way, period. And there's some, maybe after your first or second book, or if you partner with the right press, they actually listen, but the people that I've worked with have really been generous in listening to what the message of the book is and incorporating art in a way that I feel honors what I try to do to send the message out to more than just academics. Like, it's about the meaning too.
Great. Yeah. And it's a beautiful book. Hopefully people will get their pre-ordered copies very soon. But yeah, and as you said, they really paid attention to detail with the back, the whole thing. It's
Yeah.
lovely. Um, so one of the other things that you called out here, um, I'm on page 121 now, and this is in your list of Dr. E's 10 tips for publishing, which are great practical tips. Um, and one of the things that spoke to me was you talk about how you should be strategic about presenting work in public, to sort of go along with the book that you're writing. Um, and here you called out academic plagiarism and writers' fear of plagiarism. And that really spoke to me because, I work with authors who are working on work in progress. I run online courses where there's a whole group of people and you don't know the other people who are in that group. And some people are very understandably hesitant to share their works in progress, with other people that they don't know. So I wondered if you have advice for people who have that sort of worry on their mind. While it's important to share work in early stages, what are the benefits of sharing, but then what are the risks and how do we navigate that?
Yeah. I think this question is, to me, adjacent to the question of AI, right? And artificial intelligence. And so the answer to those questions, for me, are the same. And that is, in your book, you say, what makes your work special? What is unique? What what part of your work cannot be duplicated? And so we know AI cannot cite sources. It just makes sources up, can't synthesize information, and it can't speak from personal experience. So those are some of the things that, what are your arguments? what are your evidence, what are your sources that allow you to write something that is unique, even if the subject is well known, even if the information that you're using, the narratives, the archives, the experiments that you're doing, even if though that terrain is mostly well known, there's something that you are responsible for presenting that will, if put out in public, alert other people that that's, of course, that's your work. And so you can't trust everybody, but you have to be able to present your work in community. And this book is really for writing groups. So whether it's professional writing groups or informal writing groups, it's to give you a guide, and there's tasks and questions that help you frame and form your work in a way that um, it doesn't matter if other people write similar things. People will recognize it as your work. And here, as a graduate student, I spoke with a couple of people, Linda Perkins and Kevin Quashie in particular, who helped me understand, like, keep your eyes on your own paper. Like, it really doesn't matter what other people write. If you write your work in the way that is unique, and you have due diligence in your sources, you're creating a unique argument, again, by demonstrating that you've read what's already there, and you put your own, experience and your own spirit into the work. People could write, how many books are there about W.B. Du Bois? How many books are there about Lincoln? How many books are there about even Anna Julia Cooper? What makes you say something different and unique? Like, what's your contribution? And as long as you're clear about that, it literally doesn't matter what anybody writes. And the idea of plagiarism now is so interesting, because we're not just talking about academia. We live in, and you're in communication, so the media and social media. I wrote about Rosa Parks doing yoga. And that came from my own research of, all of my work is based on memoir, right? Black women's memoir is intellectual history. So in the memoir of Rosa Parks, written by her nieces and nephews, 11 of her nieces and nephews, there was a reference to Rosa Parks doing yoga. And I was like, now, wait a minute. I've never heard of this. And so the book that I was writing on wellness practices, meditation, music, prayer, yoga, and exercise, when I found that citation and went to the Library of Congress, I said, no, this book's going to be about these yoga traditions, because we don't know about those traditions, right, of meditation and yoga. I was not the first scholar to see that picture of Rosa Parks, right? And we love, as scholars, to say, like, oh, I discovered this. No, I'm pretty sure the archivist who put that together, right? And there were several different kind of public facing ways that this story had been told. I wasn't the first to tell it, right? But the way that I told it ensured that people recognized this was my work. I went to the Library of Congress and got permission. I went to the Rosa and Raymond Parks estate to get permission to publish the picture, because they were very protective, rightly so, of her image, of her, and how her public image was used. So I got permission. I published it in the Association of Black Women Historians blog, and then the picture went viral, and it was great. Like, that was wonderful. But when some of the industry magazines, like a Yoga Journal in particular, started publishing the picture without citing my work, I said, okay, this is, if you have a big microphone and you're a professional, even if it's a trade publication, it's not academic, you have you've got a responsibility to cite where you're getting this information. And so I didn't even have to say anything. The people who recognized that this was my scholarship got on Yoga Journal, like, no, what you're not going to do is steal this person's work and not attribute it to the person who was telling the story in this way. And so Yoga Journal immediately made it right and said, let's interview you, let's cite your work. This is the story that's told. And so there's this interesting relationship between academics and those who are not technically accountable, right, to academics. But if you are a major trade publication and you are ciphering and stealing from publishers, that's really more of the issue than than the plagiarism that's usually ascribed to Black scholars, women scholars, or both. And so, it really comes down to, again, the quality of scholarship, um, how you write in community that is honest about what's new, what's not new, and write in a way to strategically place your work where it is date stamped in a way that it can be recognized as yours.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point that when you do share early, you build community around your work. And then those people have your back when they see it
Mhm.
getting, misappropriated.
I presented it, Association of Black Women Historians, ASALH, the Association for the Study of Life, African American Life and History, and different organizations, NWSA, National Women's Studies Associations. These organizations had already heard it before, so when they saw it, and but it's also like, you can't police the internet. If you put a picture out or you put an idea out, um, people are going to use it. That's great. That means it's impactful. But for your work in citing is also to make sure that you have the ability to use that work, in the way that you want, because there have been people who've put ideas out, somebody else has trademarked it, and then now you can't, that type of foolishness. So
Yeah. I want to keep going with the theme of community here, because on page, well, you have a whole chapter on community in the
yeah.
book. Um, and so I'm on page 125, and I want to read another little snippet. Um, so you say, most importantly, include at early stages of discussion those outside of academia who might most deeply critique your manuscript, as well as those who might actually benefit from your publications. It is not enough for you to claim your work will be beneficial. Work with actual people who can tell you if your work is helpful or not. And that spoke to me as somebody who helps people write book proposals, because often, there's a part in the proposal where you talk about audience and you say, like, here's who's going to enjoy this work or who's going to find it useful. And I always tell people, don't speculate, don't write wishful audiences. Like, look at your track record. Who have you talked to who has found your work useful? Now you tell the press, you can be very confident that that
Mhm.
audience is going to buy this book when it comes out. Um, so I wonder if you could talk about how you've been in conversation with your ideal readers for this book, before it came out, what you're doing right now. I mean, you're here doing this webinar, and what your plans are, as the book enters the world.
Well, I'm again, I just have to express my gratitude for you, using your substantial platform. And I usually turn down invites, and we were back and forth in conversation when I saw you blurb the book, and really, again, didn't know you personally, but really appreciated what it meant to be affirmed by someone who is doing this as their life work. Um, it's really important to think about community versus audience. So in writing the book, the core chapters are about, the personal, the professional, the publishing, the public, and the political. And these are all different levels where you will experience stress, but it's also an opportunity to have a beautiful practice, right? To enhance your relationship to writing on these different levels. And so some people stop at the publishing level. Like, I'm going to publish a book and then I'm going to go find an audience. And again, if you're in race and gender studies, critical race and gender studies, as it should be, as it should be done, community engagement is not an afterthought. It is, who is going to benefit from this writing, and how can they let me know that this writing will actually be beneficial. So because I've been writing in community in different ways, and it's messy. Let me just say this: community does not mean, the goal of developing academic community or external community is not consensus. There's a lot of people who don't like my work. Cool, uh, but it's really important for you to do your due diligence to say, if I'm writing a book and I'm saying it's, you know, impactful, according to who? You don't get to call yourself an ally, right? People people in these marginalized populations get to call you an ally. So, for example, the Black Passports book that I wrote, I worked while I was at Clark Atlanta University with some high school students who were in an early college program. And I used that book to say, you know, this is what I say the book is doing in terms of preparing you at the high school level to understand what's going on in college from a professor's point of view. And so when I wrote this book, the first people I asked to assess it were graduate students. You know, these are the people who, and it's tricky here because I wanted to emphasize to them I was not interested in their tacit approval, like, oh, this is fine, or oh, this is great, because there's a power dynamic there. I wanted real critical feedback about what was working, what was not. And for the people who are the next gen scholars, like, what does this look like for you? I also participated in a couple of Mellon fellowships for new faculty who are new on either on the tenure track or non-tenure track faculty. And I speak to non-tenure track faculty here because it's not enough to assume that everybody wants to be a tenured faculty member. There are so many non-tenure track faculty members who could care less, right, about the tenure track, but they still want to write. They still want to be, but if you're teaching a 4 or 5 teaching load, it's hard to do that. So I've worked with, and listened to and exchanged with those, different types of scholars that, different types of, institutions and levels. And I'm fairly confident that this is helpful because I built it based on the questions that came from those forums, right? And so the people who were doing the peer review for the press identified the weaknesses that allowed me to understand that I wasn't bringing forward enough the voices of those who said they needed a book like this. Right. And so the editing process was really about bringing forward those questions that came from the surveys and the discussions to say, this is what I'm really interested in.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, as someone who is also writing books, is currently writing a book, having my, doubts about it and everything, it can be helpful to remember, like, this book is not going to be for everyone. Everyone's not going to like it, but I have talked to the people whose opinions matter to me, and I know that they've gotten something out of this, so I feel okay, putting it out there. So I appreciate your having been through that as well. Um, we have a few minutes here at the end. I just want to take a quick glance at the Q&A to see if what we might have time to touch on. Let's see. So this is a big question. So I don't think we're going to cover it all in 5 minutes, but do you have any thoughts about the current landscape in academic publishing for Black feminist writing? And how can Black feminist writers navigate the publishing landscape, given all of the sort of external things that are going on, dismantling of DEI and everything? Like, what could you offer as advice or guidance?
Keep writing. It's that simple. It's not easy to write, given the fact that they're banning books, and in the last chapter. And, I have a terrible, terrible memory. That's another reason I write so much, because I'm like, where did I put that? It's in here somewhere. But we're really up against laws, literacy, labor, and leadership. That's what I wrote, right? These are our challenges. The laws, the literacy, people not reading, the labor that's not valued, hiring politicians to lead institutions when they've never actually been an academic, right? Like politicians are celebrities, right? We're going to put them in charge of academic departments, even though they've never written a book or an article or been through peer review, right? There's a reason why it's called peer review. you know, and understanding that all of these different barriers are present, they've been present, they're going to be present, especially if you're doing work in ways that dismantle some of the established knowledge, right? There is no such thing as purely objective work. Toni Morrison talks about this when she says that it's, you know, we teach values by having them, right? You have to have values and you have to be able to articulate those values, but also walk the talk. So it's not enough to write about liberation if you're not actually working for liberation. And it's difficult at a time when people are being pushed to, you know, into polarizing arguments, and those answers to those questions are being used, you know, for like example, Claudine Gay, right? Very public takedown, that there is no right answer. Whatever you say or don't say, you're going to be wrong. But if you say you're doing social justice work and liberation work, you have to know what you're doing. Who are you in communication with? What organizations are you supporting? And if you can, you know, put your head on the pillow and sleep at night and look yourself in the mirror and be held accountable to those communities that you say you are working with or serving. And that doesn't mean doing everything that they expect you to do, but writing in a way that you can demonstrate when asked, these are my values. This is what I'm teaching and writing, and this is the academic tradition that backs it up, right? That there's so much fundamental change that's going to happen in the next 2 decades. And in some ways, so much of what we're facing is new. But I feel, again, going back to the motivation for writing this book, I feel that I was mentored by people who were deeply invested in freedom, academic freedom, which means disagreeing with people. Like this mentality of like, I don't like you, so I'm not going to cite you, or I'm going to try to fire you, or I'm going to try to, you know, there's been so many shady stories that I've heard over the years. And it's like, that's not it. People don't have to agree with you. They don't have to like you. They don't have to like your work and your writing. But if we can agree that this is what this academic project is about and what it's capable of doing to bring out the best in what humanity is, you know, is here to do, then, you know, that's all you can do. And that does not, that lets you off the hook, because then you don't have to police other people, right? And so to the question of what does this academic landscape mean? The way that I understand that is by understanding the history, that going back to my first book, Black Women in the Ivory Tower, 1850 to 1964. That, you know, reading the first 100 years of Black women's experiences in higher education are the very reason why I've endured. Not because I'm special, not because I'm brilliant, not because I have, you know, all this set. It has nothing to do with me except for me understanding the people who have come before me have created this space. My job is to create space for others. And this space is, you know, terrible, but it has beautiful possibilities.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to end on. And I think many people here are going to want to go read your first book now too. So I just want to make sure people know where they can find you. They can find all of your books at your website, right? Professor S. Evans dot
No, no,
net.
no. Yeah, it's professorevans.net.
Okay, professorevans.net.
Evans.net.
I'll ask Rebecca to share that link in the chat with everyone. Um, and then we'll wrap up. But if people want to kind of go deeper with this book, how can they work with you or work with this book? They can pre-order it, of course. What else?
Thank you so much for that. I have been asked several times for independent consultations, which my schedule does not allow. What I envision for this book is to work with institutions, to you know, work with groups of faculty member, but also to work with groups of people who are in a formal or informal peer writing group. There is no one book that has all the answers. This will not solve all your writing problems. It will create questions and tasks that allow you to sit with other writers and work on the problems that will help you get to a completed book, but also have work-life balance so much as it can be had in these times, right? And so if you go to professorevans.net, there's links to all of the other books, but this one in particular, how to get in touch with me for group workshops. But it's not even about getting in touch with me. Get the book, get all of the other reference books that are in the book, form a writing group, and write and work with your professional organizations to make sure that there is some sort of sustainable process for understanding how books are produced and reviewed and prized and engaged. But really, it's about the writing process. So I'm happy to be a part of that for larger groups, but it's really about you accessing, one of the terms that I use from Fannie Jackson Coppin is this concept of self-education, and all education is self-education. So it's not dependent on me. Like, I'm not going to be your writing savior. It's really just you collaborating with other writers to help you move the project along. And this tool and the larger group workshops that I want to have will help to do that.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Evans, for sharing all of this wisdom with us over the past hour. Thank you, everyone who is still here hanging on. This recording will be posted later today or tomorrow. If you're here, you will get an email with the recording link and links to all of Dr. Evans' resources. So the information will be at your fingertips. Thank you again, everyone, and hope to see you sometime soon. Bye, y'all.